Hello there, this is Carlos, the Overlord of the Showdown Battle League. We are bringing you here for our first 2 weeks power rankings. But to start it off, we're going to go over a few transactions that happened in the first 2 weeks, including ones that happened on draft day or immediately after the draft. So starting off, the first transaction, well actually, coach introductions. Along with me today, we got Brian,
Hi.
Sifra,
Sup?
Jack,
Yo.
and Noah.
And Noah.
And Noah
I
And
said, hey, did
Noah.
not register.
did not
Hey,
register.
what?
But moving on. Robert of the Carson Ride-Ons made a transaction. He dropped Serena and Rapidash, picking up Shiftry and Ninetales. Any thoughts on this transaction? I do kind of like the Sun synergy there. Not a fan of getting rid of Serena, but as we'll see later, it was definitely mainly a transaction made for a trade later on.
I don't really know why necessarily he decided to just pick up the Sun Core, because that's kind of like with his weird offense and then stall. But, and I also don't like losing Rabbit Spin, but he still got Defog and Shift Free, so it could be pretty cool.
This is like Sun meets Electric Terrain Hyper Offense with some weird random like stall mons. I really don't know what he's going for.
Moving on to the second transaction, we had the Miami Dawn fans, Travis, dropping Cloyster, Driftbloom, and Komala for Hitmonlee, Type Null, and Mudsdale. For me, I think this was a positive transaction overall, although for what he got, it's a bit weird to be doing a trade like this so early, not getting any hugely beneficial Pokemon, but I do like the Mudsdale for his team, and the other two aren't too bad.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way where I definitely don't dislike this transaction. The biggest thing is he used up three of his four transactions immediately. So if there's any changes he wants to make to his team down the line, and spoilers there are, then he's gonna have tough time finding the transactions to do it.
Yeah, this seemed to be just shaving off a little bit of fat off of the top of his original build, and honestly, he could have just drafted these Pokemon instead. But he's new; he's figuring out what he's doing. So hopefully, he likes what he got now a little bit more than what he had before.
I think Mudsdale's good because he actually did not have any sort of ground type before. So especially with a team like Mega Blastoise, he kind of needed to pick up something to take those hits.
Hmm.
I did kind of like Cloyster under a Rarvale, though. I thought that could have been pretty cool. And, he doesn't really have a ton of, that he's getting with those mons, because, Driftbloom couldn't do that, too. So I was a little disappointed to see him, not try to abuse the Rarvale a little better.
He does have a Hitmonlee potentially with Unburden with Grassy Terrain though, which could be cool way to use it.
Okay, moving on to the next trade, we have Coach in the Call, Seafra, the Washington Natu Nulls, dropping Roselia for Bellossom. Yeah.
All right, sir, I'm going to you explain this one.
Yeah, it's kind of this was my last pick. Dropped it for a different low tier grass type. Roselia I had originally for spike support, and then when I started building for my week one matchup, I noticed that I wished I had more just pure ground resists, and I like strength sap. So that's what this transaction equates to.
Same. Yeah, I like the transaction overall. Now that we have four slots instead of three, it's not as brutal to waste it like that or to use it early
Yeah,
on.
it does feel a bit like a wasted one, especially because it is my last round pick. But we'll see if I regret using my transaction so early.
I think you got plenty left and you can manage. And seeing how trade friendly people have been after week two, you'll probably figure something out if you need it. But moving on to the next transaction, we have another coach on the call, Noah of the Lehigh Valley Phantom. How do you say their name? Phantoms. Uh,
Lehigh Valley Phantoms.
oh yeah, whatever. But he dropped Rotom Heat and Heracross for Moltres and Gengar. When I looked at this trade immediately, I I think Gengar is a great pickup, but the first two Pokemon I like a lot. Obviously, from what we've seen these first 2 weeks and what we'll discuss, it's been a really solid transaction for him. But at first glance, I wasn't exactly pleased with it. But it seems to be fitting his team pretty well.
Moltres is a super cool fire type for Noah because he's got Pelipper with the rain, and it's like the one fire type that actually benefits from rain with its 100% accurate hurricanes, which is really cool.
Gengar also works really well with rain because a big part of his strategy is that like he has a team that needs to bring good solid ground resist to against his team, but a lot of his other mons can really pressure them with Gengar, Moltres with they get pressure opposing grass types, which
Okay. But yeah, kind of what he's getting at is Gengar and Moltres are really good at pressuring the grass types. I guess Heracross was too, but Gengar has a better speed tier. Same with Moltres over the Rotom, and they kind of synergize a little bit better with his team. And I really liked these picks when I saw them picked up.
I think it was just Jack having flashbacks about Gengar Week 2 that made him hop out of the call. But moving on to the next one.
whoa,
Whoa! We have
look at this prankster.
the Portland Ferrothorns, Erob trading Swellow for Darmanitan in free agency. This was a follow up on the trade we'll be discussing next, where he gained some extra points from the trade with Travis. Thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
it's the same team.
Yeah, I mean, this trade, he got some points freed up from a trade with another coach coming up that we'll talk about next. But it's honestly kind of a similar role, except instead of Specs Boomburst from Swellow, you've got Scarf or Light Orb, Flare Blitz from Darmanitan. So you're trading in a little bit of speed for that raw power, which is going to work with his bulkier team if he needs to break another bulky team.
Yeah, it's one of those transactions where it's pretty clearly a positive transaction. Neither are bad Pokemon, but there's a reason Darmanitan is a higher tier. Pretty straightforward there. But moving on to the trade we've been talking about so much, it was actually Vaporeon for Milotic straight up. Uh, Definitely an interesting trade. I think from what it sounds like from them, it's more of they each preferred the other Pokemon more, and it just lined up perfectly for a trade. But yeah.
Yeah. I think it was actually Robert who traded with him on this one. Looking at this, not to call out our graphics maker.
I mean, to be fair, Erob has been saying he loves Vaporeon so much since he first joined the server. So,
Wait, doesn't Europe have Vaporeon?
he traded for it.
Didn't you say Vaporeon could beat Mega Gardevoir or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
No.
Yeah, Erob has made it known how much he loves Vaporeon, so I'm happy for him that he managed to get his love on his team.
And actually, one last transaction. Moving on, I forgot to add. I actually made a draft day transaction similar into the manner Seifer did. I dropped Metagross for Gligar. Pretty straightforward reasoning was I had no ground resist and needed defog, so it sort of fit pretty well.
Yeah, your team really sucked.
Yeah, my team was so bad. I can't imagine
Would
anyone
lose
losing to
to
me.
that team.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone losing to Carlos. Imagine losing to Carlos, lol.
Yeah, that would suck. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up our transactions for the first 2 weeks, and we will go straight into our power rankings.
Woo!
So on these power rankings, we have it shows for each coach where they ranked them last week with the plus minus moving down the board or up the board. Starting off towards the lower half, 16 through 14, we all were pretty much on the same page with the three coaches, but we had differences on where we placed them. Anyone want to say anything on those three coaches?
So I guess specifically, I guess I'll talk a little bit about like I know Tony. He was notoriously rated the number one draft by Jack, and maybe aren't so hot after that. But I will say Tony did he did play some opponents that are ranked pretty high. So
Mhm.
I think he kind of got like a rough opening schedule, and then for another coach down there, I'd say that Travis, he like what we said before, he's he from the lower league and he's coming up to join us now, and I think there's probably going to be like a little bit of a learning curve. It was really cool what he tried to do with Ninjask in his last game, and even though he didn't necessarily have a great abuser to pass into, I thought that was a really cool plan, and I'm looking forward to see what he comes up with going forward.
I still really like Travis's team, but I think one thing that is going to hold him back to the fact that he burned all three of his four free agency moves right away. So if he's thinking that his team might not work in the first 2 weeks, he doesn't have as much flexibility to change things now pretty much going forward.
I feel like Tony needs a shout out for the high jump kick kill to start off his game against Noah in the
That was
first
really cool.
week.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Admittedly, it did help me realize, okay, I can. This is gonna be locked in right away. But just as like the surprise factor of like, oh, I'll just parting shot out because there's no way to outspeed, and then he just whipped out HJK.
I will say for me personally, when it comes to these bottom three coaches, I've honestly liked what I've seen from them. I feel like pretty much everyone on this list, in general, have shown in the past they have some solid experience and can actually do well. I think, like you were saying, Tony, just a rough two opponents. There's probably a good chance he'll bounce back. But Lorna actually really liked what I saw from her week two. The
Her
red,
week 2 match was really fun
yeah,
to watch,
that was,
especially that Registeel.
and soon us realizing Blade just stops setup Registeel.
Yeah, I was sure she had won when she got the +6/+6 Registeel with Curse, and then Doublade came out with the Sacred Sword, and I think Brian had that moment in the chat as well, where it was just like, wait, this doesn't auto win because Sacred Sword ignores defensive boosts.
Yeah, I had that moment. I was like, wait a second. Oh, I did that like slash info on Sacred Sword, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, it was a really interesting match and very competitive, and I really like what I saw.
I feel like did her opponent even realize it at first? Because didn't something else die before Blade came out?
Yeah,
So I'd say when it comes to her week two match, that's a battle that could really be a win in a different scenario. But the Blade happened to be having the perfect move, which I guess was reasonable to come. But even the coach didn't know it did that. So I think I really liked her prep week two and her play. Maybe with a better scenario, she can start pulling out some W's with that.
These people being on the bottom is just a reflection on how strong everyone is in this league now. Is that like previous seasons they've all done really well in the past, and that's just a reflection on how everyone else has been doing in the league.
And also keep in mind when it comes to these rankings, when you see these large drops, except for Jack's -15, most of these are
Minus
due to
15.
due to the draft and having 2 weeks in between it. So this is our first power rankings that is based on actual play rather than just the draft. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of volatility, and with 2 week gaps in between rankings, expect it throughout the season. But I guess moving on to the next area of coaches, Kevin has had a really interesting first 2 weeks after being one of the higher ranked teams. It was really disappointing to see his play the first 2 weeks. I feel like he's been, I don't know if it's his prep necessarily, or I feel like he's been pretty careless in his play to an extent where I feel like if he played like how we've seen him in the past seasons with this good of a team, he should be easily winning, especially week one where he nearly lost until Scarf Gyarados came out. But
Yeah, the the way you started that off, it sounded like he's 0-2. He's sitting at 1-1. It's not an awful start so far, but he did get bailed out by some flinches from his Gyarados week one. But the Gyarados kind of got what was coming to it with a crit that one shot it in week two.
yeah,
So there's hacks on both sides,
plus
but that week one was stolen a bit from the jaws of defeat.
And Carlos caught his redemption too. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. We'll get to that though. No,
Woo!
bro, and I even called it. I was sitting there in the battle. I'm like, he's about to flinch me again.
Oh yeah, I was in that battle. That was really entertaining. I was like, oh, he's just gonna waterfall flinch everything. I guess
It,
I kind of got that back for calling it.
I mean,
once Gyarados got his first kill and I realized it was Scarf, I'm like, oh, I kind of lose, and then I lost. But moving on. This middle area is a bit more mixed up, but I think a coach we're really split on is the Carson Ride-Ons, with his highest ranking be at number 8 for me, and his lowest being number 13 for Sifra. Why do you guys think we are so split on this specific coach?
Really, for me, I feel like I have to jump in a bit. There's almost like I think there might literally be. Let me check the rankings just to be sure. Yeah, we've got 8 teams that are 1-1 right now, and one of them has to be closer to the bottom.
And 4 of them are 1-1 plus 1.
Yeah, no, it's a tight match for sure, and this is definitely not an indictment of Robert that I have him at the bottom of that group.
Yeah,
I
that.
put him.
Go ahead. You know you.
I was gonna say I put him a bit higher because his only actual loss was to Jarrett, who's one of the very few 2-0 teams, and who's also typically have like high records most seasons. Whereas I think for all those 1-1 teams, I kind of looked like where was their win, what was their loss.
Mm-hmm.
Like not as bad losses.
yeah, and I think that he handled even if he didn't really realize it. It's like really tough when you start seeing something setting up in your face like that, especially with the Registeel. Would have maybe had him a little higher if he recognized what he should have done immediately. But the fact that he was able to eventually figure it out kind of kept him in like the middle area where he was able to pull out that win.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, in regards to his loss to Jarrett, it was actually pretty close. Which, well,
It was a close one.
if I recall, it began out a little spread out, and then he came back. But he did a good job not getting blown out versus a
Yeah.
good opponent.
And I mean, I think he
It was
made.
like
Was he top 4 last season?
He made
yeah, I was
So,
gonna
he
say
made
he's like
semis.
the playoff
Yeah.
underdog
yeah.
when we did our brackets, making semifinals, and he went ahead and did that. So maybe we have him where he wants us. Just keep sleeping on him.
The perpetual underdog.
I'm I'm so ready for Robert to win this season. That'd be hype.
Oh boy, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. He had a solid win or a solid, I guess, a pretty good play in his loss against Jarrett, who's one of the top teams, being at 2-0 right now. He also has his only victory against one of the bottom teams in Lauren's team, so not the most convincing way to get wins. But I believe he comes in around the middle of the pack. I like what he's doing with his team a lot better than what I had it ranked at, because I didn't really like it coming out of the draft. I think he's managing it pretty well, which is good to see. Yeah.
Another coach in this area to look at, or I guess couple, is Brian of the Boston Braylooms and Carlos of the Oklahoma City Electivires. Their week 2 match. I think it's That was an exciting match.
So
Thoughts?
are we talking about both of them
I
or
mean, just the week 2 match mainly, but
okay.
Brian.
Just the week the week 2 match that that Carlos kind of stole from Brian a bit to make up from the one he got stolen from him week 1.
Yeah, no, this has
Yes.
definitely been a hacksy start to the season in multiple battles. I like's been said, this middle pack is really tight, and some unfortunate hacks or forfeits or stuff like that have not made it any easier to deliberate. I think all these coaches could have been maybe 2-0 or 0-2 if little things went their way.
Oh yeah. So I'm thinking about the Brian Carlos battle. I think that the pivotal play in that was really the Thunderbolt. It was Thunderbolt, right?
Yeah,
That got
Yep.
a para. It parried, and then immediately that turn a full para. So
yes.
that's like a 2.5% chance.
Yeah, it's a 1 in
That
30 or something
yeah,
chance.
something super tiny that caught Brian and allowed him to get cleaned up.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
kind of unfortunate. I'm 0-2 right now, but I think if I made one mistake against Ifra and that caught me.
Yeah,
I even though I played that whole match pretty well, I made one big mistake and it cost me the whole game. I
yeah,
could have beat Carlos, but I made a couple mistakes, and of course the hacks didn't help. But I think I can definitely bring the season back. But right now it's looking a little tough with a tough record right now.
Yeah, really 0-2 isn't. I mean, it's tough to not have a win at this point, but there's plenty of time. We got 10 more weeks. Don't even have to go undefeated to make playoffs at this point. So, not worried about Brian. If history shows anything, he'll bounce back with an easy win week 3 specifically. But moving on to another coach in this range, Newt. What do you guys think about his team or play?
I was really
okay.
impressed by Newt. I think he played really well against like staying in on Heatran and the Solar Beam just to live and to slack off just shows that like he knew exactly what he was going to bring. And throughout the entire game, it seemed like he had an answer for everything Travis could do. And then against Noah, he definitely like kind of played him a close game,
Two for
honestly.
now. I
I'm sure
think.
Noah will talk about it, and like maybe if different stat like that potentially that was like a choice scarf guard or like late game that could have maybe won it
Two.
for him. So I think he still got one of the best drafts, and he's shown a lot of good stuff at the first 2 weeks.
Sorry, what were you saying, Noah?
And two. Not week 3 yet.
Silly
Yeah, yeah,
Canadians.
yeah. Silly Canadian. Them Canadians.
But
Yeah. He did play Gaten and Travis. But I think he had a okay showing against Gaten. I would have liked to see him play a little bit better. His win didn't look too dominant against Travis, which is why I didn't have him ranked higher. But from what I've seen, he's been doing pretty okay.
Right, that I thought maybe he was a little underwhelming against Gayton, but he was on point like the entire battle against Travis. Like the slack off play was phenomenal, and then just not panicking, just figuring out what to do with the ninjas when it was passing around, and he seemed like he had an answer for absolutely everything, and he was in control the entire match, and I really like to see that.
yeah. That was
When you don't have to bring like you don't have to have like a crazy play or do anything like ridiculous where you can just be in control basically the entire match and Kyle on top, and I really like to see that.
yeah. I definitely feel like with Newt, he's just a really smart battler where he's not gonna make too many mistakes in a battle that you can take advantage of. You really have to wear him down over the course of the game because you're not gonna get an easy kill against him, especially with the fat that he's got on his team.
moving on, another coach in this range, Brandon of the Albany Alterias. Uh, One interesting thing about Brandon and Newt is that they played the same two coaches the first 2 weeks, and they ended up with a very close record. Newt ended up at +1, and then Brandon at +0. But for me, it was the differentiator was probably the play versus the better coach in both those matches. I feel like Brandon did better versus Gayton than Newt did versus Gayton. And then, I mean,
Yeah.
they both ended up winning against the same coaches, but I just liked what I saw out of Brandon in that Gayton match.
Yeah, I thought Brandon played Gaten pretty close, and that definitely influenced my ranking on Brandon,
Oh, yeah, you have him
especially.
a
I
bit
mean,
higher.
yeah, Gaten's he's one of the undefeateds left in the league after 2 weeks. So the close match against him really it just shows that Brandon's a strong coach.
Yeah, me too. Might change after what I just witnessed.
Oof.
Uh,
Spoilers, no.
no spoilers.
No
I mean,
spoilers.
yeah, we're recording this as you, Rob, and Brandon were just playing, so we'll see what happens there.
Oh, I didn't even see how that battle played
You
out.
don't want to. It's okay. I didn't play good either my first 2 weeks, so it happens. But
Battle of the Combine, Battle of the Sub, actually.
true. Moving on to about the 8 or 9 slot in that range, we have I think Carlos, the Oklahoma City Electivires. We've already touched on the two very hacksy battles. For me, that made it really hard to rank myself. I mean, I really should be 0-2, and I really should be 2-0. So
So 1-1's about right.
1-1's about right, yeah. And then all the 1-1 coaches, I feel for me, I think nine's about the spot, somewhere in there. But
I feel like
yeah,
with hyper offense, like with a more offensive, less bulky team, I think just one has a bigger influence on the game. Because if you have a bulkier team and you get like one crit on you, chance you can still sort of hold up. So I think there'll probably be a lot of games this season for like a full hyper offense team that really does come down to some sort of crits or para or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they will always come into play, especially with those turn or matches where there's only like 10, 11, maybe 15 turns max because you're playing such an aggressive style. That being said, the two matches that Carlos have played have been pretty blatantly hacks reliant or hacks influenced, but I think he played pretty well throughout both of the matches. He definitely was in a good spot to win against Kevin, and even despite the hacks, I still think he could have beat me depending on how certain turns play out, which had me pretty impressed because he had a chance to win both those matches, and I think that puts him as a pretty solid 1-1 team. That being said, do I have him at the top of my 1-1 teams? No, I don't. There are a few who I thought were a little bit better, but we'll get to those when we get to those.
and
Yeah, I think kind of what Jack was saying is that when you have the type of team that Carlos does, you just basically have to put yourself in a position to win at the end of the game. Obviously, you can't really anticipate hacks happening, and I thought even in both the games where it didn't work out necessarily in the way anyone wanted to see, did a pretty nice job putting himself in favorable situations, and it just got unlucky at the end, and that's just bound to happen because this Pokemon in this game sucks.
And I mean, this is my first time ever using like anything that has an attack ever. I'm used to running just Umbreon Cresselia, so there'll be a learning curve. But I'm happy with my play for the first 2 weeks for what it is. But I guess moving on to the top half of the rankings. Next up, who do we got? Probably Jack, Dennis, someone like that. Let's go with Dennis. What do you guys think about Dennis?
Dennis did really well week 1 with his Lauren, put himself in a really good situation. And then again, he forfeited week 2, so it's kind of hard to talk about. But it's Dennis. He's used the same team all the time. Mega Manitran did its thing, and so looking forward to see how it does going forward.
Yeah,
Dennis has always had at least one game every season where he's taking a forfeit. So he took it now. Good plan. Get it out of the way. Get that bad matchup of the forfeit out of the way. And like Dennis now has a free schedule to go 11-1 with Metacham. So let's do it.
Then
It would have been nice to see him play Jarrett since that's like that's a battle where you can really start to divide some of these coaches up here. But
Yeah.
we will have to wait.
Yep.
Yep.
Speaking of Jack, his team, that week one battle was pretty good versus opponent ranked right above him roughly. It was really impressive to see him control a game like that and then see E-Rob's game the next week. But then it was also
Yeah.
a little tough seeing Jack week two. So I feel like from week one, that's pretty much why I put him so high. The really nice win versus a solid coach, but then followed by a loss versus another really solid coach.
Yep.
Yeah. I definitely I think Jack versus E-Rob week one is the early contender for the best battle we've seen so far. I thought that just looked like a battle between two heavyweights kind of drawing out each of their moves. So I really enjoyed seeing that and really thought both the coaches showed well, even with Jack being the one to eventually eke out the win.
I'd say that that first match was phenomenal, and even when he got hit with that surprise like psych up tech, didn't let it phase him, and he just kind of like I was saying with what happened with Newt earlier, where just a match where it felt like he was in complete control no matter what happened, where he wasn't as lucky in the next week against me. Um, there was just basically one play in the middle of the match where it was like a 50-50 when Jardigon was in against Zygarde and right and he didn't, and that completely changed the whole outcome of that match. And if he gets that play right and fire punches on my Ferrothorn, we're talking about Jack potentially, you know, beating me by a pretty high differential. So just that one play that kind of changed the whole match. And then other than that, I thought he's doing really well with a really cool team so far.
Yeah, if I'll speak on myself quickly, um, yeah, I felt like week one, I played the team like people saw my draft. They kind of knew what I would do with it. Like it was going to be kind of bulky and stally, but it's going to be able to keep control, which I was able to do in week one. And then week two, I took a big risk, sort of saying like I can run offense too and run trick room. And I made a few misplays and ultimately put myself in a bad situation. The game ended up turning sort of a stall fest until ultimately my first. So I took a week, or words, took a risk week two. It didn't pan out for me, but I think I've got a better idea of my team, and I feel okay against all my next matchups going forward. So we'll see.
And now we sort of move into like the top five. The top four is a lot more clear. I think Jarrett probably at five here. Like we were saying before with Dennis, he got the forfeit win week two, so it's a little hard to place him. But being a 2-0 team is a huge early on, so coupled with an impressive week one win, he definitely deserves a high spot.
I was really disappointed to see a forfeit because I was really looking forward to Jared against Dennis. I thought that could have been a really cool match, but given what happened week one is that he did he lose to Robert last time in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Wasn't that
Yeah,
kind of like a revenge? It was like a
Roberts who
revenge
got him
game.
from the playoffs. That was a revenge game.
I really like to see that come back strong against him, and then
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with Jared going forward.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Yep.
I think he had a pretty so he's basically 1-0 and from his actual play, which is why I don't have him ranked as high as the other, um, 2-0 teams. And I thought the Jack and Erob games were pretty impressive, which is why I had Jared a little bit lower than them. But I do think his week one game was pretty confident, pretty good. And he's obviously 2-0, so definitely deserves a spot in the upper half of the teams.
Jared is also he's always been very consistent in regular season. Like most seasons, he's gone like 10-2 or somewhere in that range.
Hmm.
So I think it's fair to say that like if he played Dennis, he could be 2-0 legit, but I think he'll be pretty good going forward. He's in a good spot.
Definitely.
Moving on to that fourth spot with E-Rob. Uh, Not the greatest week one match, but it was against a tough opponent. Uh, Week two was definitely a nice turnaround for him to see perform up to about what we expected. Sableye is absolutely terrifying under him, and anyone
I
who used the
love
move taunt
I
should be
love
banned.
how he's using Sableye so far. He's really getting a lot of use out of that mon, and just his play style. It kind of feels a little bit different than what I think. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just very meticulous, and the team itself is really well constructed. And I really just have enjoyed watching him play all his games.
Yeah, I mean, at our week 2 MVP race, I think he has Sableye ranked like 8. So I think compared to like a bunch of threats like Lando, Metachan, like Gengar and Gyarados. So just I think it's really cool how he's kind of using that like bulky offense, like or even like more of just a really balanced team with Sableye and all those balls. And it almost is a little unfair to have him ranked this far ahead of like Jack, for example, because I think Jack beat him 1-on-1, and
Yeah,
Jack's opponent is higher on the list that he lost to, and then Erov did beat someone who's lower on the list. There are two coaches that I think are going to be pretty close. I really want to keep an eye on, but I just overall I'm really liking the way he's playing so far.
in our defense, Jack himself does have Erob, I think, 5 spots ahead of himself. So so we're not all just digging on Jack for no reason.
I
Jack is
mean,
excessively modest.
Man, I got blown back week 2. I can't get
Yeah,
over it.
yeah, you did.
This is me grieving. I'll give Erob one niche piece of credit because everyone's kind of said what I would. He's probably the best person in the league at using the item metronome because I think he's now gotten like 2 big like kill streaks using metronome Pokemon. So I've never seen anyone use it that much, and he's getting a lot of use shit out of that item.
yeah, definitely impressive from this group of coaches towards the top. So many one-on-one teams is hard to differentiate, but I think when it comes to the top 3, or at least the top 1, it's pretty clear cut. But all 3 of these coaches are very very
Oh my
solid.
god.
Uh, I think they're yeah. Let's go with Gaten at 3. What do you all think about Gaten in his first 2 weeks?
Really impressive.
Dean looked really good really good in his first 2 weeks. He was very dominant in his wins. His team looks really good. We had him really ranked high, so definitely still a top threat based off his draft, and he's definitely followed it up with some good games. I would like to see him play against some of those higher ranked teams, just out of curiosity. But yeah, it's pretty convincing wins, pretty convincing play. That's all I had to say about that.
Yeah, I'm looking for. I was gonna mimic Ryan's point. He's looked really good so far, but I think his schedule for the first 2 weeks is a bit easier. I'm really looking forward to the stretch where he plays myself, Kevin, and Dennis, because like I think those are like all 4 people who either like won playoffs or like made it to finals multiple times. So that'll be a really good stretch. I think if he can get wins in that area, a lot of people will realize how good he is, and that'll be good like proving ground for him.
One who's kind of flown under the radar. I wasn't here for a while, but he's hasn't really made a deep playoff run that I've noticed in my experience. I don't know if he's made one when I was out of the league for a while. He's really proven himself, and if you are going to take like that next step, what you've got to do is that against the coaches that aren't ranked necessarily in like the top 5, you got to make sure that you just take care of business. You don't do anything to choke a game away. And I was really impressed in how in control he was in every one of his matches. And that's the mark of a coach who's really really solid. What he needs to do to put himself in a good situation going forward.
Yeah, definitely the nice thing about being we shrunk down the league back to 16 teams, and being as deep as it is, every coach is going to have like multiple games on their schedule that will help us show how good they really are and if they're really contending this year. no one has a easy schedule at all. So I'm excited to see some of these really nice matchups in the coming weeks.
I don't know. I got to play Carlos. I felt like my schedule was pretty easy.
Yo,
That
same.
worked out for you.
My schedule
That
is
worked out real
so
good.
free. But moving on to the top two. At number two, we had Sifra. What do you think, guys?
I think he's a bum.
Yeah, he's a bum. Get him out.
Yeah, basically. I
Let's
mean,
be honest.
undefeated in his SBL career in the regular season. He has not ended that streak, so hopefully someone can manage to do that sometime soon. Maybe week 3, maybe maybe
Let's go, Lauren.
maybe week 9. I I'm thinking week 9, but yeah, no, he's been just as impressive as usual since he's joined the league. Really excited to see what he does with this team. As we saw last season, Clefable is a terrifying mon, and then with the speed stuff he has going on and how he's been using it, I even Normalium Z I've been really impressed with how he's used it for that sort of Z crystal. Not expecting a whole lot much more than Z belly drum, and he's managed to get some use out of it.
The record, Clef didn't get a kill until week 10 last year, so I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm really impressed how he's been using Espeon, because that's a mon that like on paper, oh, you can like baton pass maybe, and then, but the Z Hyper Beam with Combine was really cool. I know I wasn't expecting that, and he's been able to get really good use of, especially even like Speed Pass. I don't want to say it's like a gimmick, but you know what to prep for, and Scolipede itself can be really scary. And with the way he's like kind of like used a bunch of gimmicky stuff between like that and Sapsipper, Perish Trap, Azu, which I thought was amazing. I think it's like
Wow,
really
this
cool.
call's been really bad.
What's that?
Call has been really bad in terms of quality. Lots of people are cutting out. Yeah, pretty good wins out of Sifra. He's 2-0. He's doing good. Good stuff. Only reason he's not number one is because all of us think Noah is the best player ever to touch Pokemon. So
That's A-Drive.
Noah's wins have been a little more dominating than mine, so I think it's hard to argue for anyone other than Noah at the top spot.
I mean, Noah did face the number 1 draft week 1. Just say. But yeah, speaking of Noah at number 1 and his pretty dominant wins, he has a really impressive win week 2, which even if it maybe had a 50-50 with Drotagon in the middle, any win versus someone like Jack that's that high differential is really showing that you are definitely deserving of the number 1 spot, and once again is going to be a threat for the playoffs.
Ryan, save us.
Yeah, oh,
nice.
true, yeah. Ryan, please come back.
Yeah, I don't know what much there is to say about Noah's team. The rain thing he's got is really cool. It's something that you have to prep for every week, but it's not his team's identity. So you can't sell out to stop it. And then at the same time, he's just got that. It was talked about earlier, but the pressure on your bulky grass types to take on both Swampert and Zygarde, coupled with like Weavile, Gengar, and Moltres that can switch in on them, it makes for a really tough dynamic where you need to keep your grass types healthy, but he makes it really hard to do so.
Yes.
Yes. Speaking of, any last thoughts on, I guess, the whole first 2 weeks?
It's been fun. Hopefully we have more fun. I love you
Agreed.
guys.
Aw.
I don't know why I said that. That was pretty odd. I actually don't think that's true. Some of you are alright.
Speaking of the future in the next few weeks, are there any games you guys are looking forward to? Maybe in week 3, week 4?
I know one I'm really looking forward to is Jack against Gayton in week 4 because we kind of talked about Gayton. He's starting off really well, and Jack's been a perennial powerhouse in the league.
Fun fact: we don't really talk about other leagues. Gabe and I are in another league, and about like 2 weeks ago, we played, and I hacked the hell out of him and beat him 5-0 with Celesteela that just
Oof.
flinched everything. So this is like gonna be a grudge match for that.
Oh, that's hype.
But I'm also just looking forward to playing him because yeah, I don't want to lose 0-5 again.
You're cheating on us with other leagues?
Damn, this is a big thing, Jack.
Yo, exposed.
Oh, exposed, but Cipher talks real quiet, so I can't hear him. Oh.
So I had to turn my mic down so that I didn't sound
Whoa,
like a
whoa, whoa,
buzz.
whoa. I turned up your
Whoa.
sound. Okay, now you're quiet.
And to mention that Sifra and I are about to play this week in another league where we're the top 2 teams.
Dang, yo, you guys are cheating too? Brian, we're the only wholesome individuals
Damn,
in this
bro.
call.
Get me in this other league, huh? Where was the invite, boys?
You can't break out the other league talk after I give jack shit about it.
Big facts. Speaking of, I think Jarrett has some really interesting matchups, and I guess in to go with that, me and Sifra, because week 3 Jarrett faces me, and then week 4 he faces Sifra. So we will be able to see if the 2-0 start really stands up versus some really tough opponents these next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jared versus Carlos would be really cool. Just because they're two guys that it's kind of tough to get a read on so far because Carlos's games have been so hacks heavy, and Jarrett's only got the one game plus the forfeit win. So I'm really excited to see that one because I think it'll really start to divide up that middle group and allow Jarrett to prove that he's right up there with the other undefeated teams.
And generally in that division, if Carlos loses that match, he would go to 0-2 in the division, and for tiebreakers, that could definitely come to effect later on. With already having 4 teams so tight at the beginning, we'll have to see.
I'm looking forward to you on week 4. I think that's just gonna be a really exciting matchup. Just two like the highest ranked draft teams.
Well then, after all that, any last thoughts on the season so far going forward? Maybe MVP races, stuff like that?
Save life for MVP.
Big facts. Mega or regular though?
Make it save life.
Yeah.
Big facts.
I mean, the top 5 there have been a lot of, or the top 10, like Gyarados and Gengar. They got most of their kills from one game. I've been really liking how Brandon's been using Tapu Lele, seeing that at 5-1. Definitely Amon. This season it doesn't have Psychic Surge, so even with just Telepathy, it's been a really outstanding Mon for him. But yeah, I think that wraps up our power rankings for this first 2 weeks. We will see you all guys after week 4.
Enjoy this hour-long video.